There it goes.
I want to say it's time for sharing the spiritual journey. I'm Larry Lindstrom, and I'm the chaplain at Sinclair College. These interviews offer us a chance to engage with the Sinclair faculty and staff who are willing to share insights from their own spiritual journey. And my goal is for these conversations to inspire you as you explore the spiritual dimension of your life. So today we have the privilege of interviewing Lindsey Slanker. Lindsey is a professor of English and Humanities at Sinclair and serves on the board of directors of the Multi-Faith Campus Alliance. So first of all, Lindsey, we're glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy.
Good. And before we get started, I just want to ask about your connection to Sinclair. I believe you were a student there before. I'd just like to hear some of the things that have been a part of your experience at Sinclair.
Absolutely. I got my associates in modern languages, so through the Humanities department in 2009. And then I went on to Wright State, where I finished the rest of my undergrad and graduate studies. But while I was at Sinclair, I was taking classes in modern languages and fulfilling all of my requirements for my degree. But I kept taking religion courses. I would not stop until eventually I had taken everything that Amanda Hayden had offered, who's still teaching and who still is a very important mentor to me. And she said, Lindsey, just do it. Just go into religious studies. You can do it. And I was like, Amanda, I'm so scared. Like, I don't know what I can do with this. Like, I had this whole plan. I was going to interpret foreign languages for businesses. Like, I was so excited. And she's like, you're too good at it. Just go do it. And I listened to her. And now I'm very thrilled to be able to be teaching in not just that field, but also English, because I studied English literature because I think stories are such an important part of humanity and our society continuing. And of course, we can see that trend in religion as well. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that background. That really helps us to get a clearer picture of you. And speaking of stories, and let's to talk about the story of your own experience. Yeah. And maybe to start at the very beginning in terms of how it was for you with your family and extended family, in terms of your understanding of either spirituality or faith, and how that all played out early on in your life.
Absolutely. So my extended family was the more religious side of my family. By and large, I split my childhood between Texas and here. Texas, of course, being part of the Bible Belt, I went to church with extended family. But what happened was I spent my high school years up here in Ohio. And most of the emotional support growing up came from my friends. My friends, I leaned on so much for just belonging, but also just being able to have open conversations. And so a few of my friends were in the tradition of paganism, and talking with them about how they viewed the world and how they experienced things, I felt such a kinship. I was like, that makes way more sense to me than anything I had ever heard growing up in an organized church setting. So what had happened was I also was an avid reader, being an English major, that won't surprise you. But I kept reading about different traditions that to me it made more sense, and it felt like going home much more so than I had ever felt in a Judeo-Christian atmosphere. Stuff like reincarnation makes total sense to me. Like, I don't know why, that just clicks. And other alternative spiritual ideas. So paganism really, that is the path that I connect with the most. That's what I label myself as pagan. And so growing up, those were the big influences on me.
Yeah, it's really helpful to hear. I can only imagine how countercultural that all had seemed to you, particularly in Texas. I'm from there as well. And so having a sense of what that culture is about, the sort of the challenge of trying to go upstream, as it were, where there's just an assumption that everybody goes to church or everybody has that particular perspective. How was that as you became an adult?
Well, so what it is with the church thing, and church continues to be a strong community, a strong place for people to find community, right? And so if you're not one of the regular attendees of church every Sunday at this time, you're going to be missing out on a large group of not just that tradition, but people. Like, you are labeled as a loner, you're labeled as antisocial, you are like, if you don't agree with us and if you're not okay with this building and its teachings or anything like that, there's something that is antisocial about you. And it wasn't that I was antisocial, it was just that I'm also not one to play along. I'm a very honest person, and if I don't feel in what I am doing and acting and saying, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm a very honest person. So it was small things like, not joining in prayer, or, not just kind of glazing over when the pastor would speak, or not being down for reading or something like that. And my immediate family wasn't very traditional. My immediate family, I did not find much persecution until I was much older, like 16, 17, 18. And that's when they were like, you're kind of scaring us. You need to get back on the more normal path. But it was one of those things where I was like, if we can't peaceably talk about it, then we're not going to talk about it. But this is me. This is who I am.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, help us understand then now, as you, in terms of the pagan tradition, tell us maybe 2 or 3 of the strengths that you find in that understanding, how that's been of some help to you.
Oh, man. So paganism being a nature-focused, unorganized tradition. Those are fairly fancy terms, which basically means that we hold the earth as sacred. We're polytheist, so we worship multiple gods often. And being unorganized, it doesn't mean that we have a set book or a set tenet, aside from the fact that, whatever you do comes back to you 3 times 3 times 3. So the major Western understanding is kind of the sense of karma, whatever you put out into the universe will come back to you. But the rest of it's pretty fluid. If you find yourself more attracted to an African culture, you may worship an African deity. If you find yourself more attracted to old Eastern European, maybe the Norse gods, you're welcome to put those into your tradition. So that flexibility to be able to explore what is interesting to me or what is inspiring to me, I think that I've tried to put in every facet of my life, not just in my spirituality, because of course, when you do that, you open yourself to learning new opportunities, new ideas. So I absolutely love that. Something else that is really pushed is the no harm to anyone, includes yourself as well. So I struggle with anxiety and depression, and that concept of no harm to none includes yourself. So even not just harmful actions, but harmful words, like don't put yourself down, try to build yourself up. And that is something that has helped me get stronger and better and more peaceable within myself. And really being humble, just acknowledging that everything is so much bigger than me, and that there are so many other things that a deity would be looking after, not just myself, is something that has made me work harder just to be able to do what I need to do and not lean on something that not just leaning on deity. I mean, that helps and that's inspiring, but you got to work for it too.
That's really helpful to hear. Yeah. Well, and as you mentioned before, with full honesty, maybe to take the other side of the coin, are there some challenges or some things in the pagan tradition that you struggle with at this point?
Right now, being open about it is really hard for me. I actually lost a job because the employers found out about my religious tradition. Absolutely. Yeah, and yes, and I won't name anything because this is going to go public, but that was something that was very hard for me to deal with because I like to be judged on my skills and my abilities and not, a label. And, I hang out with fairly open-minded people. I surround myself with open-minded people. So being smacked in the face with that I mean, of course, that is just indicative of my privilege that it wasn't until then that I was smacked in the face with not being welcome. But then it really made me realize, oh, this is still, people still have an aversion to this. People are still scared of this, and we are very scared. And so I kind of incorporated the study of fear into my graduate studies as a result, because it was like, I need to know what makes people so scared, because if we know what makes us so scared, we can get over it. Teaching for me is not just a job, it's a lifestyle. So even outside of the classroom, I'm like, how can I teach others to be better? How can I teach others to be more open? And so consistently studying that has been an important part. So being open about it has been really difficult for me. And in knowing how to explain it when it's so fluid, people are very skeptical, I find often, because it's not easily labeled, it's not easily categorized. I am extremely inspired by just about all traditions on the planet, to the point to where I actually have tattoos representing all the religious traditions on me. I have a symbol for like 16 different traditions on me, because I have not studied one that I haven't had an aha moment. Do you know what I mean? So studying Islam, studying Buddhism, studying Sikhism, all of those things, I'm like, that makes sense. Like, that's what humanity is about. But I'm still pagan at my heart. And so trying to explain that to people has been a challenge. So oftentimes I just don't bring it up. But if you ask me, I'll be honest about it.
That's helpful to hear as well. And of course, for many people, there's the challenge: how do you take your faith and put it into practice, to live it out on a daily basis? And you've hinted at some of that already, but I'd be curious to hear what you find as the important ways to practice the faith as you understand it.
So not just gaining patience in myself, but gaining patience with others. Even something like getting cut off in traffic. It's very easy for me to be like, "Gah," because I hold myself to such a high standard. I think to myself, why don't others do that? But instead I kind of think, there's another side to the story. Think about that person. Maybe they're late for an interview. Maybe somebody they know is hurt. You don't know. So don't get angry. Just let it go and let them go, and hope that they travel safely and others are safe. And that's all we can ask for. Little moments like that, in where I can gain patience and compassion. But more recently, it's about being responsible and making better choices for the long term rather than the short term, especially environmentally and socially speaking. Being a nature-based tradition, take a little bit of extra research into what would be more helpful for the environment, what would be a better idea for, funding a different kind of animal rescue than another one. For example, I went to Thailand in November on vacation. And in Thailand, they have tons of opportunities for animal tourism, specifically with elephants. You can ride an elephant, you can pose for a picture with an elephant, and you can do this, that, and the other. And that's very attractive to me, because it's like, oh, I get to touch the elephant, as many people are. But it turns out that's very bad for elephants to be put in those kinds of atmospheres. They actually, because they are so big, they are often beaten, and they are often wrangled by chains and by very destructive equipment in order to put them in the mindset that they can be around tourists without hurting the tourists. It's much more better and responsible to go find an elephant retreat to make sure that they are well taken care of. So we did the extra research and we went to a place like that, a retreat, more than a happy pose for picture riding elephants thing. But also socially speaking, I mean, being responsible about what America needs to change, which is a great deal. And how we can help people from our different positions. We can't do one person can't do everything, but it's been, especially recently, how can I help people around me from my position? What can I provide that they otherwise would not be able to, or would not have a voice or anything like that? So still very much experimenting with that, but I'm motivated to do so because, of course, do no harm to none. That creed helps me too. Yeah.
Those are key words to live by. That's really important to hear
Very
that. Yeah, good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this interview will be seen by all kinds of folks, I'm hoping anyway, and that would include some students at Sinclair maybe who are just at that point of beginning their spiritual journey, just beginning to become aware that there are multiple traditions and that there's more than one way to look at things. I'm wondering if you would have some advice.
Yeah, mind blowing.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you would, if you could offer some advice or guidance for those students and for anybody who's just at that step of how do I get started.
Absolutely. I encourage people to, if they aren't, if this is an area that they're interested in expanding and learning more about, not that they should ever feel pressured to. Some people just aren't there yet. Honor your own journey. If you need to take a break, take a break. But if you are interested in exploring spirituality of others or alternate paths or anything, I highly, highly recommend speaking to a practitioner who is active in it, and not third-hand accounts or even second-hand accounts. That's so important. You don't know how many people are like, do you worship Harry Potter? No, that is not what I do. Or they really get through movies, you know, an idea of what paganism is, and I'm like, oh goodness, no. It's so important to talk to a practitioner. I also highly recommend, you know, if you're up for reading the original literature of a tradition, you know, the Quran or the Dhammapada, if you're studying Buddhism, to definitely sit down and do that. But rather, if you're ever faced with something that is new to you, pay attention to your own gut reaction. Are you scared because it's new? Are you scared because it is something bad? Oftentimes not. It's because it's something new. Be aware that you're feeling that fear, be aware that you're feeling that anxiety, and sit within it for a minute. But don't punish others because of it. Just do what is good for you. Back away if you need to. That's totally fine. And really try to come looking for opportunities for compassion and connection rather than opportunities for fear and prejudice and judgment. That is highly what I recommend, because I can find connections with just about every other religious tradition to paganism. Like, I see so many elements of Buddhism within paganism, and even elements of Christianity within paganism. You know, like, we are teaching that charity, that compassion, that, you know, honoring of each other. So look for connections, honor connections before you honor the fear, I guess.
That's excellent insights to hear. Thank you. And certainly we would say that as students want to know more, they could come and talk to me or come and talk to you.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
learn all kinds of things in that way.
No, I am absolutely proud to be within Sinclair in this community, and being able to talk to you, having met you, has been definitely one of the highlights of my career. So I really knowing that this is a good space where anybody can come and people are free to talk to me. And even if I'm not the one who has the answer, we will find the answer for you. I promise.
There you go. There you go. Well, Lindsey, I just want to say it's been an excellent time to interview with you. I thank you for this conversation, and we'll see you further as we share the spiritual journey with others. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much.